welcome back to the Butterfly House with more tea and stories threaded with fibre. Thank you so much for coming back if you are a return viewer, and if you are new, then I hope you stick around and there you find something here that brings you some pleasure and inspiration. Now, I've named my first episode Where I Forget Things, and that is quite plain to me when I listened back that one of the major things I forgot was to say who I am. So I'm Jane, and I know some of you have picked that up through Instagram and Facebook. So welcome, I'm Jane. You can find me on Ravelry and Instagram, and where else can you find Facebook, as the Beady Butterfly. If you Google the Beady Butterfly, I come up. I've made some better links. Someone said on my Ravelry page that I've created a Ravelry page especially for Threaded with Fibre, and someone said that they tried the links on there and they led nowhere, and so I had a go, and she was quite right, they led nowhere. So I hopefully have fixed that by putting them in the introduction paragraph at the top rather than links further down. Couldn't get them to work. I tried on my laptop, I tried on my iPad, and they just kept coming up with oops, and this page may have been removed. So forget that part and go straight to the paragraph at the top of the Ravelry page in the first thread that I opened. The other thing someone's asked me is, will I put show notes somewhere? And the answer to that is yes. I will put show notes somewhere. I will probably put them on my blog, but I may put them on the Ravelry page, and or we'll see how it goes. I have to learn how to do a link. As I said in my first episode, I'm not afraid of technology. I'm just a bit thick about it, and a little bit wary and a bit nervous. And my head is so full of stuff. I haven't got room to learn many new things, and I want to learn things that inspire and I enjoy, and shoving loads of computery malarkey in there is nothing inspirational or enjoyable, I can assure you, for me. So it may be a case of when I can grab a son and he does it for me, or it may be that I apply myself and learn how to do it properly, which really I want to do, but there we go. So tea, I also forgot to say the tea I was drinking. I had the cup I used in the first episode is very precious to me, and I brought it out especially for the first episode, and it's a cup that my dad used to use, and it was pool pottery, and terribly 1970s original. And I kept it. He meant a lot to me, my dad, and he used to have his tea in that cup every morning religiously, and be quite perturbed and upset if it was in a different cup. And in fact, if he could have his afternoon tea in the cup as well, he'd be well chuffed. So I dragged it out and put my tea in there, and thought I would tell you about it, and I forgot. And now I'm telling you about it and I haven't even got the cup in my hand, which is a bit scatty. So this is a completely different cup, and I'm drinking mint tea because I like it. I tend to only drink tea, not coffee. Cheers. So there we go. The other thing I wanted to mention first off, because I really don't want to forget it, is the wonderful support I've had from Mina Phillip from KnittingExpat. I have been following her since she started her podcasts, thoroughly enjoying them. I find her engaging and natural and interesting, and no gizmos attached. It's what you see is what you get, and that's what I like about her a lot. And she is something to strive for, I think. Anyway, I also mentioned that I did a test knit of her Highland Peaks shawl, and very, very kindly she has offered to give away a copy of her pattern as a prize on this podcast. Now, as it is the first giveaway, I want to keep it nice and simple, so I'm going to ask a question. I'll open up a thread and ask a question, and hopefully people will reply, and I'll just pick a winner from that. And so my question is about something that must be close to the hearts of every fibre-y person, and that's colour. And for me, colour can be an inspiration, but it can also be a comfort. I can be drawn to something that is of a particular colour because there's a comfort about it, or familiarity, or whatever word you might want to use there. So my question is, and I've got it on my show notes, I'm just leaning forward so I can read it. What was the colour that you grew up with and that you either loved and or you hated? For me, I grew up in the 70s, late 60s and 70s, and as we all know, 70s colour, brown and yellow, and I think I have a vague memory of my mother putting me in navy blue and lime green, which I think I'd put that as my hate. Pretty sure that would be my hate colour, lime green. However, it's all individual, and so I'd love to see what your favourite colours and your least favourite colours are, and why. More importantly, why, because I think telling stories about ourselves in little ways can be very revealing as to where we've been on our journey and where we're going to go on our journey. So that's the giveaway. A lovely pattern from Mina Phillip called the Highland Peaks shawl, and the question will be on the Ravelry page as soon as this podcast is up, if not before. So there we go. Now then, why do I call this place the Butterfly House? My daughter watched the podcast last week and she said, Mum, why do you call it the Butterfly House? And the reason why is very simple, really, is because the place that I'm in, you can see quite clearly it's a summer house shed, whatever you want to use. I have jam-packed it full of all my working paraphernalia. As the sun comes and goes, it's highlighting various bits of, that's all my stash, and I've got some sewing pieces, and behind there is lots and lots of fabrics, more fabrics in there, and I've got a work table just there. And I called it the Butterfly House because when we put up this summer house, we had to clear a back corner of the garden, and there was a buddleia, which is called the butterfly bush in its common term, at the back, on the back wall. I'm sort of where I'm pointing here, and it was massive and very, very old, and really on its last legs, and all the blooms were growing at the top of the plant and over the back wall and out onto a public walkway, which was pretty for everybody, but we had no benefit from it whatsoever. So we had to clear that away, and we did it. We had to, because of when I booked to have the shed delivered, we had to chop down the buddleia when it was in its middle to late blooming stage, and it was jam-packed full of butterflies, and I didn't want the butterflies to miss out on the blooms, the last of the blooms, and those that were still to bud. So as we chopped down this bush, we took every bloom, and I found every container in my house, and we stuffed it in water and left it as a sea of blooms in the garden. And spent the next 3 or 4 days with a myriad of various butterflies and varieties just coming down. Now I have put a couple of pictures on my Instagram feed. If you scroll right back to the very beginning, you can see some of those pots of blooms, and I brought a few in the house as well and left the French windows open, and 1 or 2 butterflies flew in and partook of the blooms and left again, and it was absolutely lovely, and it was a pretty end to a little bit of a shame. So we are putting a new buddleia in the front garden, which is south facing, which will hopefully I will tend to a little more carefully and keep it nice and compact, and will be there for many more years to come. So that's why this is the Butterfly House. Now the other thing I want to talk about before I dive into this heap of woolly stuff all around me is something that's popped up here and there, mostly I've noticed on Instagram, but I followed up a few through podcasts, and I'm catching the sun quite badly. I'm just going to come forward a bit, see if that works. Hope that works. Yes, is the word of the year that people are doing. I love that idea. I'm very much a visualing person. No, that's a silly word. I visualise emotions. So I really cued into that one. I really thought, yeah, I get what people are doing here. And so my word of the year is acceptance. And I am applying that wherever I can throughout my life and for this year, but also in a way of dealing with things that have happened of recent times. I lost my mum about 1.5 years ago, and there are lots of things I need to accept about that, not least because she's not with me, but lots of other things. And there have been other family things that need acceptance. So in its broadest terms, emotionally, there are things to accept, but there are also much finer things to accept, and things like failure. I struggle with that word. I don't struggle with failure. Everybody fails because they need to learn. But I do struggle with the word. For many years, told my kids, you're not a failure. Don't use the word failure. There's more to come. You're just on a learning journey and all of those sorts of things. But they just threw that word into conversation. Oh, you're such a fail, and I failed, and it popped up on television programs, and they're just very blasé about it. So I have tried to accept that the word failure doesn't have for everybody something as impactful for me as it seems to have. So that is a journey of acceptance. But the most important thing I have discovered is I need to accept success. My partner compliments me many, many times, but I don't know what to do with a compliment. So I need to accept a compliment. I need to accept a success in my work or in my life. So that is my word of the year, and its success remains to be seen. But I will work with accepting what comes to me as the year goes on. So we shall see. So into finished objects, I think. And I showed a few things that I was working on, and some of them, yay, I have finished. So getting out of my box of socks, Anthony's socks are finished. 1, 2, and they're not on sock blockers because, as I said before, he has enormous feet. Now, I'd finished one sock, as you saw, so I finished the second sock. I was there. I went up the leg, did the cuff. They've come out a treat. They fit him. These have been washed, and the yarn, which was the Ousterman step, is softening up. It is a little bit scratchy, but he tried it on. He was quite happy with it. So I will allow him to have those now. I'll let them come out of the box. I've even got my other son's socks back because I want to take a picture of them in the box, which I haven't done yet. So I pinched them back. And the second finished object is Elise's socks. Now, one of the things I forgot to tell you was the yarn I was using for her socks. So I will say that now, and it is this one. Let's see if I can get that on. I hope the sun's not shining on that too much. Circus. And I used, well, you had a selection of animal colours, and it's this one because it's supposed to be for the zebra. Akin to the zebra, they're all various animal colours. And the pattern I used was, I'm going to butcher her name, I'm afraid, Ruby Slippers, and her name is Ina Zakharevich. So, sorry, apologies if I've got that horribly wrong. And again, I showed you one finished sock. Ta-da! And the second sock was a bit of a saga because, honestly, I undid this thing 4 times. I had reached the point where you divide out to widen off across the instep and found my place in the pattern because I tinked back to a suitable point and set on up here. However, it's a bit, with this pattern, it was a bit like, you know, when you pat your head and rub your tummy at the same time. And I can, you know, just about do that. But this pattern then threw in balancing yourself on a ball and reciting your times tables at the same time. You had to do 3 different things at once and something else on top of that. And so 4 times later, I eventually got to a point that I could just go, woohoo, heel, I get that. So off we went with the heel. And then they all came together, up the leg and your lovely picot cuff. Now it's done, and so pleased that I persevered. I haven't washed or blocked these yet. And this yarn, I have to say, again, like the Austerman, is a little bit scratchy. So I have high hopes that it will soften up. But she very rarely wears anything on her feet, so they will probably end up as house socks, which is fine. And so a little bit of toughness and, if not a bit of itching, is not going to do it any harm at all. So there we go, finished. 3 pairs of socks in my box for Wool and Vine's Cal socks in a box. Yay, really pleased with that. What else have I finished? Oh yes, this. I was going to talk about this. I put this on Instagram, and several people have very kindly said how much they liked it. This being a piece of sewing. Now the sewing I do is not garment sewing. I'll come to that later, but I haven't done garment sewing for quite some time, and I'll talk about that later. My favourite type of sewing is hand sewing. I cut my teeth on embroidery when I was very young. My grandmother showed me how to embroider, and I love embroidery. It is a very relaxing way of sewing. Now, I produced, I will try and find some to show you. I used to do iron-on transfers, which I have a collection of, and then you iron them onto little bits of fabric, and then, bless her, Grandma turned them into napkins and things like that. And I have, it's a cover that you put on coat hangers to protect, it's a dust cover effectively, and it comes from the 1930s, possibly even earlier, that my great-grandmother made. And I fished it out of a collection of bits and bobs that I found when we were clearing out my mother's house, and she saved tons and tons and tons. But what she'd done, bless her, was put in scented sachets and various concoctions to keep moths away, and then never stirred up the fabrics, and they had slowly discoloured through the pile. So although nothing has been completely destroyed, there are various spots of discoloration through, and I found this piece in that collection and put it through a gentle hand wash, and yay, I've got it as clean as I can get it. So maybe next time I'll bring that through as an example of a beautiful piece of quite simple but lovely emotive embroidery. So the piece I put on is a project bag, which I make, but I don't sell on the internet. This is the sort of thing I put on my artisan market stall, and it's a good example of the work that I do. I made the basic construction using my trusty sewing machine, which I have a love-hate relationship with. It loves me and I hate it. So I did all the straight seams, and I even attached this satin ribbon using a fancy stitch, because satin is notoriously difficult to sew by hand. If the needle goes in slightly wrong, you have a tendency to pucker through a thread and it can look a little bit untidy. So I used the machine on that, nice sharp needle, nice and quick and precise. However, everything else is done by hand. There's a velvet bottom and some homemade piping around. And what I did was I found a fabric that I liked, and I let the fabric inspire me. It does the work of design primarily, and then I just take hold of it then. So I started off by this stitching effect here, which is an homage to sashiko embroidery or sewing, a Japanese form of sewing, which is very simple, what we would call running stitch, but it's only an homage because this is embroidery threads, and I haven't followed any of their geometric patterns. But what I've done is I've followed the design of the fabric and then highlighted round these leaves with little stitches, and then I've French knot and beaded up on various points. And to finish off, because I don't like seams showing and what have you, I've used some Victorian lace. Now this piece of lace here, and which is also highlighted here and here, is a piece of lace used, or saved should I say, by my great-grandmother. So that is a genuine piece of Victorian lace. And then these little rosebuds are made from a ribbon yarn that you knit with, which I have gathered up and made tiny little roses. And it is a 3-coloured ribbon yarn and it has flashes of green in, so I've cut them so that each green puts a little leaf effect on there, and there's another one there, little cluster. And then some beading through to anchor the lace. And the thing I like most, it's my favourite stitch on the planet, is the edging stitch, and that's blanket stitch. And I use it a lot with things that I make, because top stitching, well, because I don't like my sewing machine, top stitching is an absolute nightmare for me. So I'd rather do by hand. So you don't get that kind of slick bought in a shop look. You get a much more honest artisan approach, and it's I think it works really well. The inside is fully lined, and I have actually put in a double pocket and a label for the beady butterfly, and again allowed myself a little bit of a sewing machine moment with some, let's see if I can find it, there it is, some fancy stitching on the seams. Really, really happy with it. It does its job beautifully, and I will put it on my stall and sell it. And I've got some more to come on my work table, which you can't see. I'll show them as they pop up if I feel it, the need. I would do a lot of commission work, so sometimes they come and go before I've even had a chance to sell them on the stall. So those are my finished pieces. Been a busy fortnight. So what am I working on right now? Well, I'm still working on my sweater. The blessed sweater, the cotton sweater. I will show it to you because, oops, it is coming on. And when I showed it to you before, as I said to you, it looks a bit like a dishcloth. Well, now it really looks like a sweater. Yay! I have high hopes that this will work. There's my marker from where I was when I showed you the first time there, and I've done downwards, and we now have, I'm not sure I can get it all in, there we go, we have a body coming, and the engineered seams, they twist around the body. I'm sure if you look on the pattern, and I will link it in the show notes, the seams, let's see if I can stretch it out, I have a slight sort of raised detail to them. They're a really nice stitching pattern, and off the side of the seams from one to the other around your body is this draped effect that runs down and through and across the hip. So I look forward to seeing that, and the cotton is doing that job of draping really, really well. It's my only concern is its tendency to show the stitching. Now, in the spirit of my acceptance, I'm accepting that as maybe part of its design, but also when I wash and block, I may lose some of that. So we'll see. And the bag it's in, I'm terribly sorry to say, I cannot for the life of me remember where I got it from. It's a Japanese knot bag, and I bought it because that's my colour palette. Those autumn russets and greens are 100% me. They sing me. So there we go. That's where the sweater is at the moment. Really pleased with how it's going. I haven't done it for a few days, but we'll see. The next piece is something new because I finished 2 pairs of socks. I had a desperate need almost instantly to cast on another pair. I don't know, this sock thing, it takes a hold of you, doesn't it? And you can't deny it. And it's in a bag I made, again, using my trademark blanket stitch. This bag is made from a blouse that my daughter wore when she was about 6. I like to repurpose lots of things, particularly jewellery and beads, but also fabrics that have some meaning or are just beautiful things that you just can't buy. And this obviously means something to me because my daughter wore it. It was her favourite shirt and I loved her in it. I love the colour. It's a needle cord, so it has a really, really nice feel when you pick it up. And I took this is the back of the shirt, and this is where the sleeves would fit in, and so I chopped the sleeves off and just brought the whole piece and wrapped it right round and up, and this finishes with the back hem. So all the work's done for me really in that respect. And then I cut out from the sleeves 2 little triangles, a little bit of maths. I measured it, make some nice easy triangle shapes. They're all lined and thickened with interfacing. And then again, no top sewing, don't do that. So I hand stitched all the pieces together with blanket stitch. So it's, you know, it won't go anywhere. And it's done in a silk thread. It's a vintage French silk thread that I picked up in an antique market somewhere, and did the test, didn't break, in good strong condition. And then I used it to make a little loop, and this is a button that I found in my mother's button collection when I cleared her house up. So there we go. That's in this bag is Mr. BB's socks. And the socks I'm doing for him, I picked the pattern, he picked the yarn. And they're Michael's socks by Robin Weldon. And I will show you a picture of them. Look how beautifully textured they are. And it's called a brick stitch, which everybody will probably know or indeed look up. And it's an interesting stitch. It makes some very interesting material. From the outside, it feels bobbly and quite, it's sort of like a honeycomb, and you can feel it. From the inside, you can't feel a thing because it runs across the back, carries across the back. It's quite smooth, and he has pulled it up his ankle, largely for size, but just to see, because it's such a textured feel on the outside, and it's absolutely fine. It's very comfortable, and it fits. A little loose, which is fine, because it's quite a firm. It makes quite a firm material. It's not too much stretch in there either, which is why I knitted up a slightly wider sock than usual, because when I get down to the foot, there's not going to be a huge amount of positive ease in there. So there we go. That's it. That's all I've done. I've reached the heel flap, and I'm doing an alternate colour. And the yarn I'm using is West Yorkshire Spinners Signature. I'm going to show. And this particular colour, I think they called it Pigeon. I'm not sure, can't remember. And it's a complementary colour, especially for the yarn. Little bobbins, needle protector on the end there. It's going well. I'm pleased with it. I only started a couple of nights ago, and it's not the quickest knit of all, I've got to say, but it is very easy to do. And once I have got the rhythm, I don't need to constantly refer to where I'm at on the pattern. It's quite easy to count rows and things. So, yep, that's going well. Pleased with that. What else am I working on? I am working on, this is a long-term project. We've all got them, haven't we? And this is Arnie and Carlos Christmas baubles, which I thought I would have a crack at. And I'm experimenting as I go, not with the pattern. It's very easy, and I love the effects. I love that style of colour work. So I've made one, ta-da, not using the yarn they recommend. I can't get it, but I have found an alternative that knits up the same. And also not stuffing it with wool roving, because that would make it quite expensive. So I have jam-packed it with a fibre rescued from an old pillow. Again, my recycling thing kicking in. And that's the first one I've made. And to be honest, although I love it, it's too big for me. I find that enormous. I mean, the size of the tree you're going to have in your house if you put all 55 of these up. Going to be having to live in a mansion, aren't you? There we go. So I'm experimenting. The experiment comes from trying to make them smaller. So I'm on my first go at an experiment, which I'm using the same yarn as this because I want to see how this works. And I have dropped down considerably in needle size. They recommend a 3mm, and I've dropped right down to a 2.25. I'm using some zings, and what I'm getting with this experiment is a smaller ball for sure, but a really quite dense, firm fabric. So we will see as we stretch it, what happens. This is the next one along. This is bauble number 2, and it has opposite matching patterns, so I'm having to use both ends of the red yarn, hence the twisty hot mess that I've got going. This is why I don't do 2 socks at a time, because I end up with that, and it drives me potty having to sort it all out. There we go. I'll keep going and keep you updated on the progression. The other mix I'm going to throw into this experiment is that, I'm going to try it in cotton. I bought some red and white cotton yarn too. I like the way cotton becomes quite dense, but it is very difficult to work on double pointed needles because it's quite slippery. So we'll see if that works, or I might just retire to the back of the room with a glass of wine and give up on that one. Acceptance. We'll see. Right, what else am I going to show you? Oh yes, sock blankets, Cozy Memories blankets. I love the idea of all of those, and everybody's sock blanket looks fabulous, whether they're large squares, small squares, diamond squares, whatever. Everybody's looks fabulous, and I really wanted to jump in on that, but having only knit 4 pairs of socks, that was proving to be a little bit difficult. So I had to come up with my version, which I have put in. My children bought me this for my Christmas present this year from a local knitting shop, and it is the perfect size to house my version of a Cozy Memories blanket. I am following a recipe by, who was it by? Completely forgotten. I'll try and put the name down there. And yeah, I'm following this recipe because, well, let me show you it first. It's small. I've kept it small. These squares measure about 2 by 2. I think the Canadian knitter, I think she's doing this as well. Bryony Bears, that's whose pattern it is. I followed her recipe, and I like the way her spine comes out, and I like the way the squares join. You can barely feel where they come together. There's no lump on the back which you can then feel through, and the back indeed looks really tidy. Now the thing I'm playing with, because this is what I do, I never quite satisfied with something, I have to make it something else. Acceptance, Jane. The thing I'm doing is I'm making the spines work for me too. So I don't know whether you can see, I have placed them so that the spines form squares of their own. So rather than this striped effect that other people getting, or just having random, I have placed them so that they in themselves make a new square. Now the only drawback to this is they don't all knit up in the same way. What happens, and I've stopped at this point specifically to show you, so I cast on and joined this square to form the spine to make the opposite or mirror image. So I then had to mirror image this one. Now in order to form the spine, you either have to start at this point or this point, which means a cast on and a pick up, or a pick up and a cast on. But either way, it leaves you with a side that's not joined. And this is the, if you want to say drawback, you could, but this is the extra element to doing the blanket this way. So you have to sew up, hence the long tail. You have to sew up that seam there. Now, I defy you to find those side seams on camera. I'm sure if you had it in your hands, you'd see them quite easily. I'm going to try and find one and point it out. I'm looking on the back because that's the only way you can see them. Right, here we are. Here's one. So that's been sewn. That one's sewn. That one's picked up. That one's picked up. That one's picked up. Let's find another sewn one. Quite hard to find. There we are. That's a sewn one. That possibly shows a little bit more clearly. If I stretch it really hard, you can just about make out the stitches that come, and this is a pickup, which actually if you stretch out doesn't look that different. So that's a different element, a different way of doing it. And what I'm making out of this is almost at its point. It's this dimension is where it's at, and I've got to fill that space in there, and then one more row across the top. And I'm making a front panel for cushions. I've got 5 long skinny cushions that I bought when I bought the new suite, and one side is a lovely purple velvet, my favourite colour, purple, and the other side is a really quite neutral oatmeal-y fabric, which is quite tough and hard wearing, but is not very inspiring and not very pleasant to look at. So what I will do is I will make 5 of these, and they'll all be different, various ways, and I will then, because they're just slightly too small, they will just stretch to cover like that, and I'll hand sew them and attach them directly to the cushion. I'll show you what it looks like when it's finished, and it'll either be, wow, I must do that with 5, or it will be, one's enough. We'll see. I'm looking forward to how they look. I have a nice feel to them. The yarn I'm using, which of course I haven't mentioned, that's my phone. I'm going to have to stop. Oh, so there we go. That was a nice phone call. I had to pick that up because that was vital. Now, I was talking about the sock blanket, wasn't I? And I was going to tell you what yarn I'm using. I don't have sock yarn. Well, I do. Got lots of sock yarn, all the way up there. But I don't have sock yarn that I want to use until I've used it. So I found a yarn in my stash. I have loads and loads of oddments of Drops Delight, and I like the way the colours change. I don't know why I've got loads, because they're all different. They're all different pattern numbers, not pattern numbers, colour numbers, all of them, but they all change. So it gave me exactly what a sock yarn would do, a variation of colours. Some of them are coming up as they cross through the colour range of the ball. Some of them are completely the one section. So for instance, this one here, my next square would probably catch green and blue, but further in I'd just get a really deep red one. So that's the yarn I'm using, and I am using, now gosh, I won't know the size of this. These are Old English, UK English, size 12 needles. These needles were my grandmother's. She gave me a collection of needles, and I can't remember whether I said this in the last episode, but she had a funny knitting style. She was a tiny woman, and she needles much longer than this. She had great big long things. I probably would say 24 inches or maybe even longer. And she used to tuck them, somehow she used to tuck them under her arms, so that by the time she'd finished her knitting, they'd end up like bananas, gently curving around her body. I don't know how she used to do that technique. Anyway, I found these, and they brought back a few nice little memories, so I picked those as my knitting needles. I don't use single-ended needles anymore, but this is the perfect project for it. So there we go. That is my version of a Cosy Memories blanket. It is a Drops Delight cushion cover. Never mind. So those are the things that I have that I'm working on. What else was I going to tell you about? Oh, I was going to show you a couple of things that are already done. I'll go very briefly into them because we don't want this one to last forever. So the first one I picked is a pattern from a pattern I bought about 2 months ago, maybe, and it is the Chine or Chine Cosy by Lynn. Oh, can't read that. Let's just read it. By Lynn Hamps. And the reason I loved it, because it was quite an architectural pattern. If you look it up on Ravelry, and I'll write down underneath exactly how you spell the name of the pattern, she shows it as a long draping shawl or stole. And I had every intention of doing exactly as it says on the tin and making a beautiful stole. But as I went up, because of the yarn I chose, and again, experimental as always, because of the yarn I chose, it wasn't going to do that. It wasn't going to hang and drape down the body. It was going to do something different, and I liked what it was going to do. So this is what I came up with. Essentially, it is her pattern. So all of this, just turn back the cuff. All of this across is her pattern. Because of the yarn I've chosen, it's much shorter in this dimension. So if you like, the gauge is different to what she requires from her pattern to produce her garment. Now the yarn I chose is a silk and wool blend, and I have completely forgotten to bring down the label. It is Sue by Cascade Yarns, I believe, S-O-U-X, and it's a discontinued yarn, so if you'll be lucky if you can find it. But what it gives you is quite a firm garment, and so this sits as a winter cowl through the neck, or you can offset. Fiddly here without actually putting on. What I will try to do is take a picture of my daughter wearing it, and you will see exactly how it works. You can offset it. It's a really lovely warm thing. The fibre is wool and silk blend, 100% wool and silk blend. There's no man-made fibre in it at all. And I have made, to keep it closed, this pin. And this is the sort of work that I do for my artisan market stall. The pin itself is a kilt pin, and I have crocheted up, using the same yarn, 3 little flowers and a spiral crochet tag, and I think this is a chain stitch and some beading. These are quite pretty little wooden beads, and then there's a nice silver lined textured bead. Looks a bit like a seed, and so that matches and holds my piece together. And the edging, oh look, is blanket stitch, so that finishes it off nicely. Really happy with that. And the palette, of course, right up my street. So that's one finished object that had a pattern and changed it. Excuse me a moment. Sorry for that interruption. That was my puppy dog. He's just had a little bit of surgery, 6-month surgery, and might be able to hear him. He's had to wear his cone of shame, and our garden has a gravel surface to it, and he's snuffling around and all the gravel's rattling around in the bottom of his cone. Quite funny. He just caught my eye then, and hence the pause. So that's a finished object. Another piece I'm going to show you is another Stephen West, which again I have played around with. I made his this pattern. It's called Rockerfella, and I will insert some pictures of how that came out. That was it's gone to its new home as a gift, and yeah, I was so in love with one of the single elements of the pattern that I had to do something else, make it go somewhere different. And so I came up with my version, as I seem to be keen on doing. I knitted it in quite a bright colour because that's what this person wanted, and as you can see, the red and greens and oranges are really vibrant, and the yarn, I can't remember what it was now. It's a sock yarn. Is it opal? I think it was opal, washed up, and has a very fluid feel to it. So I stayed with the same yarn in a completely different colour palette, and I have used browns. And the element that I adored was that piece across the front. So you have a I-cord edging to it, and it's from here to here. That piece there, that is absolutely Stephen's start of the shawl Rockerfella, only I have done about 4 or 5 extra ribs to it. So these alternate pattern plain, I've done about that much extra on because I wanted it to be more. The original pattern had it sort of shoulder to front shoulder there, and I wanted it to really sweep around the neck. So that's, I totally took that from him, so it'll never be a pattern that I put out. So under Stephen's own admission, he doesn't do lace work, but I do lace work. I love doing lace work. So I made up and put in that next panel here. So this came next. And this is, he has you cast off an I-cord edge, top and bottom of this panel, and then his pattern, his own pattern, carries on down. So I made sure that when I extended the length of the top, that it provided me with the right stitch count to create this diamond pattern here. So we have, and this is done in strips, so you have 1, 2, and they're slightly offset from each other. So that's your second stage, as per his. Then the following stage I kept quite simple, as does his, and I just ran it up with side ribbing. So I suppose effectively that is very much his too, but it's much deeper. And then my love of lace took over, and I wanted to do a lace edge. So I did an applied lace edging to it, and I kept these stitches live on the needle, and I picked up along these sections. So the 2 wings are pickups, and the middle section with the lace works on live stitches throughout that whole middle panel. It's quite long. This is a massive shawl. It's stretch, well, my wingspan would be my height, which is 5'3", and this goes, that's 5'3", and then that much more. So it's quite a considerable shawl. It's come out beautifully in its washing and blocking, and the applied lace edging has little peaks and little squares of pattern which echo but aren't the same as the little squares here. So there we go. That is a sort of a mix of an homage to Stephen and an homage to my own love of lace. And I did love doing that. That was, it took a long time because it's so big, and I didn't undo anything, but I did have to think on the hoof, so to speak. So as it evolved as I knit it, I think, is what I'm trying to say. So that's one piece. And the last finished piece I'm going to show you is a piece of history. This is the oldest whip in town, I think. I have a love of tapestry. That's the second thing I cut my teeth on. So it's embroidery, tapestry. They're akin, cross-stitch, all that sort of thing, but have their own beauty. And I made this. Now, I'm not going to be able to show you this whole thing. I made this many years ago. I lived in a cottage, and we did some renovation work on it, and we blocked up an old doorway which was really quite narrow. That narrow. So that's 2 foot wide, I reckon. It's just about 2 foot wide. And we blocked it up and finished with this rather plain, boring panel at the bottom of the stairs. So I made a piece of tapestry which we had mounted, and this is the tapestry here. It looks like it might be upside down. Here we go. Yep. I took it from a picture of a piece of carpet. So the carpet was much wider and nowhere near as long. So I took some elements from that and then added more elements to it, and I ended up with a trellis window with wisteria, 2 colours of wisteria climbing down it. I picked wisteria because this cottage, the front entrance had a balcony above it, and we had planted a wisteria which, when in flower, just hung all around the front door. Beautiful, really, really pretty. And the wisteria was that one, not that one. We bought that one, thought we bought that one, we ended up with that one because it wasn't in flower when we bought it. Yeah, so that was fun. But so love tapestry. And I found again, not when I was cleaning up my mum's house, she gave it to me actually. This is the oldest whip in town. This whip dates back possibly as far as the 40s and maybe even further. And it was started by my great grandmother. It was added to by my grandmother. My mother poked the needle a few times and thought, I'm not doing this anymore. And then I, as a child, did a little, but I haven't done any since. And it's in its original little sewing workbox that was my great grandmother's. You can buy very similar ones to this, new, but I assure you this is from the period. And it is this tapestry which has clearly seen better days, has not been eaten by moths, amazingly. And what struck me most when I thought, I know I'll show this on the podcast, is the realisation that it's on its 4th generation. Not that it's not finished. That is almost unimportant. It's 4 generations of women have added to this piece. And for that reason, because I thought, oh gosh, I must finish it, at least do something with it. But no, for that reason alone, I'm not going to finish it. I have my own daughter, and I'm going to encourage her to put a little bit of herself into it too. So let me show you it. It's yeah, well, it is what it is. That's my dog at the door. We may have to let him in, we'll see. It's a little cushion cover. Right, I'm going to pause there and bring in Django because he's whining. Just one second. So there we go. This is Django. He has the cone of shame. Yes, thank you, and I love you too. Thank you. He was whining at the door because he was feeling a little bit fed up. Have you been in the fish pond? That feels wet. What have you been up to? Have you just been troughing? He's a little puppy we rescued from Wales. All my animals are rescue animals. The 5 cats, 2 dogs. Not the fish, we bought those for the children. I'm hoping that they've survived the moderate winter and we don't get a shock winter to come. So little Django, we drove to... Actually, that's not true, we didn't go to Wales for you, did we? We went to Plymouth for you, but the rescue people are based in Wales. Our other dog came from there, Many Tears. We drove to Wales for her, and we drove to Plymouth for you, you little monkey. We don't know what you are, but you're very cute. So you're going to say bye-bye, and then I can get on. Or you're going to stay in the room. He might have to stay for a bit, we'll see. So I'll go back to the sewing, which, as I say, it is what it is. It's rather typical of its period, very 40s style. It is a Penelope design. There we are, look. Penelope design. And I even have, in the basket, the original Penelope tapestry wool. Now, it's never going to be a work of art, is it? But way more important than that, and more significant than that, it will be something that will take and thread through. It is a true threaded fibre, and I'm sure my daughter will add a little bit on, and then we'll put it away. I thought I would add to the basket is a little notebook documenting the history that I know. And then when Elise is a little older, she might want to add some of her history to it. And anybody else that takes it up, male or female, doesn't have to be all women, although it's interesting that it is all women at the moment, they can add to the book. So it becomes a family piece. Now, one day it's going to be finished, isn't it? And so hopefully somebody, that person that finishes it, will keep it, frame it, not treasure it away, square it away in a drawer. I think it needs to be seen. Keep the book and share it. Deeply personal, but very important, I think. So that finishes my pieces, old and new. I have some future plans. I'm going to go back into sewing. I'm going to plunge bravely into sewing and take a hold of that pesky machine that claims to be my friend and try to make something So watch this space. I was inspired to make this a challenge to try to achieve by Isabel of Fluffy Fibres. She is doing something from the Sweet Dress sewing book. Hello. And so I thought, somebody showed it on Instagram. This is the book Isabel was talking about. So I looked it up on Amazon, and they are quite simple designs, some of them. I thought even I can do straight lines, so I must be able to do something with those. So I'm going to give it a go. I am not going to invest a lot of money in anything, and shock horror, I'm not going to do... Oh, you all right, Poppet? I'm not going to do muslins. I'm going to dive straight in. That is my way, I'm afraid. I'm not impatient. Oh, baby, you okay? Sure. I'm not impatient, but I like to see results quite quickly, and because I only ever do things once, the idea of making a muslin and then doing it all again, it's just never going to happen, and I'll end up wearing muslin for the rest of my life. So yeah, that is it. I'm going to dive straight in and I'll show you. I'll wear, I promise I will wear whatever it is, unless it's too small for me to fit me, in which case I will make my daughter wear it and take a picture. But I will show you a finished item of some description. I haven't got the book yet, so I haven't started, but I will. Now the other thing I haven't obviously done, and I may do from time to time, is I haven't shown purchases. I haven't shown new stash and things like that. I have promised myself this year I wouldn't buy too much. You can see from behind me, I did count them, and there is, I can't remember how many skeins I've got, but I've got in excess of 200 skeins of yarn and of various types, and I think I bought them all for a reason. I bought them because I love them, and I bought them because they have a job to do, and at the moment they're sitting there idle, and I think they need to work to earn their keep. So I will show you things that I have bought as opposed to new things that I bought. Not everything. A lot of it is things that you see on a regular basis. But every now and again I find something that is special. And so I will show you this yarn Mr. BB bought for me. We went to the yarn shop in Bath called Wool. I know Danny's talked about it, and technically it's my local yarn shop because Bradford-on-Avon doesn't have a yarn shop anymore. And so it's a trip to Bath. And so we poodled off down there about 3 weeks ago, I think. And in fact, that is where I bought the yarn for Mr. BB's socks. And he bought me this. He bought me some Juniper Moon. I've never had Juniper Moon before. And this is 100 grams, which gives me 180 metres. So it's going to be DK or Aran, I suppose. It doesn't say on the label. 40% alpaca, 40% wool, and 20% silk. I have a deep abiding passion for alpaca and silk. Linen is my next favourite. So hey, somebody likes it. Puppy, thank you. So I have 3 skeins of this. I have no idea. This is one of those bought it because I love it, not bought it because it has a job. I have no idea what I'm going to do with it, and I will, whatever it will be lovely. Possibly a hat and cowl set. Possibly. Maybe I'll do another one of those stand-up cowls because it's not quite as firm as the other. We'll see. I'll keep you informed on that one. So that's 3 skeins, and it is a beautiful 3 grey shades. It's not monochrome because there's no white in it, and there is the smallest amounts of, let me just see that blue in there. It's a little bit of blue. It's beautifully soft and plump, so it will be a pleasure to wear. You're getting it with the ball, Poppy. We've nearly finished, don't worry. There we go. Can you see? Oh, it's a big yawn. That's a big yawn. So there we go. I don't think I've got anything else to add. What I will do is a did you know? Only I haven't prepared one, so I'm going to make it up completely on the hoof. And it's totally inspired by this little chap here. It's about you. Did you know? Did you know that we have no idea what this dog is? No, that's not it. Did you know that Jack Russell's, we think he has some Jack Russell in him, but he's too big, his tail is different, and he has, I can't really see through his comb, but he has the most amazing eyebrows. Can you just see them poking out there? And some little moustaches. And so the vet thinks he's a Parsons Terrier, or has Parsons Terrier in him. And my did you know fact for this week is, did you know that Jack Russells, as we know them in the UK, in America, they were called Parsons Terriers. We took them as a separate breed later on, but originally Jack Russell's, not this guy, our Jack Russell in America was known as the Parsons Terrier. So there you go. That's completely off the hoof, and I only threw that in because I want to try and do a Did You Know every week, and I wasn't prepared enough. So thank you for joining me in the butterfly house this week. It's been a little bit of a pickly one with you interrupting and the phone, but both of which have an importance in their own right. And we will look forward to seeing you next time if you want to join us. And in the meantime, enjoy your 2 weeks, and I will see you again soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.